Okay, welcome to the Armchair Trader podcast, and we have a special episode for you this week. Some of you may be aware of the fact that we recently launched a premium membership version of the site, and one of the features of that membership is that you do actually get to ask us to get companies onto the podcast. Any company at all that we can persuade to come on that's already listed. And the first one that's been nominated by our readers is actually ProStar in the US. ProStar is a company we've covered before on the podcast, but backed by popular demand because you wanted CEO Paige Tucker back on the program. So Paige has very kindly agreed to come on and take some more questions from us. So welcome to the podcast, Paige.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Basically, what I thought we would start with is for those people who aren't familiar with ProStar. I mean, you can go back to previous podcasts we've done, and I would encourage you to also go to the website because there's quite a lot of information on ProStar there already. But could you just give us a quick summary on the company and what it does?
Sure. So, ProStar is a software technology company, and our flagship product is called PointMan, which is a precision mapping solution. And it's designed to precisely capture, record, and display the precise location of critical infrastructure, both above and below ground, including buried utilities and pipelines. So we can actually identify where critical infrastructure is, including what's buried below the ground, down to the centimeter on a standard mobile device such as your cell phone.
So effectively, you're a technology company, and PointMan is a data product that is accessible by anybody who's in the business of digging things up, like construction companies, engineering companies, potentially specialist surveyors and guys like that.
Yeah, when you think of critical infrastructure, particularly what's buried below the ground, there's several markets that we can serve. So you have the utility owner or the pipeline owner, and then you have the construction companies that actually design and build the asset. And then you have engineering firms, companies that actually go out and will locate and identify where the utilities and pipelines are buried. So we cover the full life cycle of the buried assets.
And it was originally you came on the podcast right at the back end of March of this year. So there has been quite a lot of development since then. And I think investors would be obviously most interested to get an update from you on progress since the end of the first quarter of this year. Looking back on the last sort of 6 months or so, I guess the big news was actually the launch of PointMan itself as a product. At the time, I remember you were over the moon at getting that rolled out and getting that out into the industry. Can you give us some flavor on just how important a launch that has been for the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me go back a little bit here. So we developed our initial product over 5 years ago and had the good fortune of bringing on some major clients, Fortune 500 government agencies, one of the largest subsurface utility engineering firms in North America, to test our solution and give us feedback. And then once they adopted it for their commercial operations, then we really knew that we had something that we could then go out and commercialize and market throughout the rest of the industry. So one thing we did though, which most companies don't have the luxury of doing, is that once you've developed something and you've put 5 or 6 years into it, you always get what I call market intelligence and feedback on things that you would like to change in the system. And sometimes you have limitations because of the way you either develop the technology or maybe technology has continued to advance to the point that you can do things now that you couldn't do previously. It's actually called innovator's dilemma, where you're sometimes stuck with what you've developed, especially if you've commercialized a product. But we took a step back and decided to completely redevelop our platform, knowing that it could take up to 3 years and cost several millions of dollars. We made the decision to do that, and it was the right decision. And we had the luxury and the resources to do it, and we launched that at the end of the first quarter. And as a result of that, we're starting to see a greater adoption in the market because it's much easier to use, it's much easier to administer. It works anywhere in the world, in any language and in any currency, so it makes us globally scalable. So yeah, it was pretty exciting to be able to finally launch that because you never actually know how long something like that is going to take. I mean, you kind of lick your finger and pick a target, if you will, but can you actually hit that target within what you forecasted as far as the expenditure and the time frame required? And fortunately, we did.
And the other thing that has been happening is obviously the technology seems to be winning wider recognition within the US utility space, and also in academia as well in America. I know it's got some sort of recognition from the kind of state level utility regulators. Can you explain a bit more about that, and how that came about and how important that is for the company?
A couple of years ago, Colorado Department of Transportation adopted our software to test on a major project, which was the I-70 expansion, that's the busiest interstate in the United States. And this section was 11 miles of expansion that goes right through Denver, Colorado. So, I mean, it impacts thousands of utilities through that area. In fact, Kiewit, which is the largest infrastructure construction company in North America that's actually doing the construction, said that was one of the most complex projects as far as the amount of utilities that were buried in the ground than any other project that they had ever been on. So after testing it basically for 2 years, because it's a 5-year project that could be in excess of $2 billion, the state measured and quantified the impact that we had on reducing damages to utilities during construction and decided that they would mandate our software. So on January 14th of this year, the state mandated our software into law. So if you are a utility company, or you're a municipality, or a pipeline company, or a construction company, or an engineering or surveying company, anybody involved in either the construction or maintenance of utilities and pipelines are required by law to use our software to identify precisely where those utilities and pipelines are buried in the ground, if it's on a state right of way, and then report that information back to the state. And of course, what that has done is number one, give us incredible amount of visibility and credibility in the market that we would have a state actually mandate our software into law. But initially, what it does is it forces these large companies and utilities and municipalities to use our software. And I'm sure at first they just look at it as something else that's enforced by the state. But once they start using it, they immediately recognize the value that it can provide in enhancing and improving their own business practices and workflow processes. And as a result, we're not only getting adoption by companies that are located here in Colorado, we're getting recognition and adoption by companies that have operations throughout the United States and even throughout North America.
Yeah, if you sit back and look at it, this could be quite interesting for you guys because you can actually. I mean, I know you're located in Colorado, and so it makes it obvious that that might be where you start off. But I mean, there are another 49 US states there, a similar kind of mandate from more of those, and you can quickly actually see how that could make a lot of money for ProStar at the end of the day.
Well, the other thing we're seeing as well, and we are in discussions with several other states that are interested in, adopting and replicating what Colorado has done, because at the end of the day, it's all about public and environmental safety, which is obviously first and foremost what the state, is trying to enforce and protect. But what we're also seeing is we recently acquired our first municipality. So now we're starting to move into the municipal space. And municipalities is where you have all of your water systems and sewer systems, and in some cases, even broadband. And our water systems and our sewage systems, in most cases, are between 50 to 100 years old. So they're in serious need of repair and replacement. So what some states are doing is actually mandating that all municipalities need to be able to digitally report the precise location of where their water systems are and their sewage systems. Well, that creates a major problem for some municipalities because the majority of small municipalities do not have a digital asset management system to be able to identify and report where their water systems and sewer systems are located. Most of them are still using paper maps called as-builts that are in a file drawer somewhere. So we signed our first municipality, and now we're in discussions with several more. And just in the United States alone, there's 30,000 municipalities with a population of under 10,000. And my estimate is that the majority of those smaller municipalities do not have any type of digital mapping system to identify where any of their assets are. So that I think is a tremendous opportunity for us with an incredible, total addressable market that I think we can penetrate and recognize a large amount of those municipalities. So I'm pretty excited about that. And in addition to that, as you mentioned, we also moved into the utility space with the signing of our first utility, which is a major fiber optic company, and now we're in discussions with another fiber optic company. So we're also starting to expand into the other vertical markets, which is pretty exciting, and in some cases, I think has more potential than the markets that we've been focusing on, which has been construction and engineering and surveying, and of course, the state level.
So you mentioned fiber optics. I mean, I know when we've had previous discussions, we've talked a lot about the aging infrastructure. You mentioned sewage systems, water systems, potentially gas and oil pipes. But the fiber optics issue is actually quite a big one, isn't it? Because you've got companies that are wanting to upgrade a lot of the telecommunications infrastructure across the US and, in fact, in other parts of the world as well, where they're actually laying a whole new set of infrastructure across whatever is already there under the ground. So I'm guessing for you, fiber optics companies, that sector could be a massive growth area.
Absolutely. Well, I'll give you an example of what you're talking about. So it's estimated that there's as much as 300,000 miles of new fiber optic being installed in the United States annually. And that's a big number. But there's currently 35,000 or 35 million miles of buried utilities that are currently in the ground. And that 300,000 miles of fiber optic is crossing over the existing 35 million miles of buried utilities in the ground, which creates a serious issue if number one, you don't know where the current utilities are located in the ground. There's a high probability that you're going to hit what's currently buried in the ground and you're going to cause damages. And those damages can be serious. I mean, you know, yeah, if you hit a water line, maybe you're going to have some flooding, or you hit some existing fiber optic lines, maybe there's some disruption as far as, the ability to operate your business until they can fix it and reconnect it. But the real challenge is, you hit a petroleum line, you're going to have some dangerous liquids that are leaking into our water systems, potentially into our rivers and our lakes and the ocean. You hit a high pressure gas line, high probability of an explosion that can injure the worker, the public, and in worst case scenarios, loss of life. And I would argue that that's actually happening far too frequently, and that number is only increasing every year. So, yeah, it's not just fiber optic either. It's everyone realizes, especially with this infrastructure bill, it's front and center now because of the campaigning coming out of the White House and on the news, that the public is aware that, our roadways, our highways, railway systems are becoming dilapidated and in serious need of repair and replacement. And, it's estimated that within the couple of weeks, there'll be a bill that's at least $1 trillion to address that issue. But part of that is also earmarked for our drinking water systems, sewage systems, and also expansion of broadband, particularly in rural areas. Well, that's going to create a major issue because I don't think everyone's aware of just how much infrastructure there is buried below the ground and how much need there is as far as repairing and replacing the buried infrastructure. But the two infrastructures, above ground and below ground, are actually connected. And you can't work on one or the other without impacting each of them. And I think that this issue of both above and below ground is going to become even more, if you will, awareness shed on that to the public. And I think it's going to be something that, we're well positioned and poised to be able to, see and recognize a lot of business as a result of that over the next several years.
I mean, this is obviously something a lot of investors will be very interested in, because the infrastructure bill is getting a lot of coverage. We're talking about some incredibly big numbers. Some comparisons are being made with sort of the New Deal and the level of spending that happened in the 30s. As a company, you're right. I mean, you're sitting right in the center of that, because for you there must be tons of opportunities that's going to open up.
Well, I like to think so. Number one, we have designed a very innovative and disruptive technology that can address, the issue of identifying where this infrastructure is below ground down to the centimeter. That's number one. Number two, we spent several years testing this new technology. Number three, we have adoption by some of the largest companies in the world, government agencies, also engineering and surveying firms, as well as the equipment manufacturers that actually manufacture the equipment that can help identify where these buried utilities and pipelines are. So part of it is, the adoption in the market by not only the large companies that have tested it, but also the equipment manufacturers and again, government agencies that are starting to mandate it. So yeah, I think we've reached that point that number one, we've proven that we can deliver on what we promised, which is disruptive. And also, I think that with this infrastructure bill, again, this is front and center an issue right now. It's not only an issue in the United States, it's an issue globally that can affect the economy of very, very large company or countries throughout the world. And we're also starting to see adoption in other countries too. We're working with a large group up in Canada. I'm pretty confident that we're going to sign them. We had a municipality that called us that we're meeting actually on Friday, tomorrow. So we're starting not only to get visibility and recognition, for the first time, we're having, companies and municipalities that are starting to call us. So, I think our name is out there now, and industries are becoming aware of who ProStar is. So maybe we're hitting that pivotal, what I like to call tipping point, where we're going to start to see increased recognition and adoption in the market, which of course, as the CEO of a company, that's what you're always aiming for.
And one of the things that has happened since we last had you on the podcast was the deal with Kramer. Can you give us a bit more flesh on the bones about that, and how important that's been for you as a business?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we're starting to get adoption by several companies in several different vertical markets. One of them was Kramer. So actually, I'm glad you asked that question because Kramer's a perfect example. So Kramer is a national infrastructure construction company with operations throughout the United States, but they also build infrastructure like highways, the railway systems for the Colorado Department of Transportation. So once again, by law, they were forced to use our software. Once they started using it, they recognized again the value that it could provide for their own internal operations. And as a result, they adopted our solution as well. So it's just an example of how companies are starting to realize and recognize the value that our software can provide. And some of these are big, big infrastructure construction companies. Well, once one company starts using something and it gives them a competitive advantage and streamlines their business operations, it almost forces the other companies to take a look at it and potentially adopt it as well. And so, we have now several large construction companies that are testing our software, looking to adopt it, several large engineering and surveying firms, other DOTs that I mentioned, which are state Department of Transportations that are looking to adopt our software as well. And obviously, the more adoption you get in the market, the more companies that you have using your software, the more exposure you have to the market to other companies. And, that should result in a significant increase in the amount of companies that we're talking to about utilizing our software, and obviously the opportunity to sell them and, sign up on annual service agreements to implement our software throughout their business operations.
And I guess it's important to stress that this is not just a US solution, that this is something that, I mean, you've mentioned Canada already, but effectively this could be rolled out by construction companies, utilities all over the planet.
Yeah, there's nothing we have to do to our software for it to work in other parts of the world. So literally, that's one of the reasons why we redeveloped our platform and moved over to AWS, which is Amazon Web Services. So our platform is now available in any country, in any part of the world, works in any currency and in any language. And we can precisely locate where utilities and pipelines are buried down to the centimeter, operating off of a standard mobile device, be it your smartphone or a tablet. So, in addition to that, we're already starting to see adoption, as you mentioned, into other countries. So, we're working with a firm in Canada. I'm pretty confident that we'll be announcing relatively soon that our technology was adopted and that now we're now moving into Canada. We're also already on projects in Canada. One of our clients is Kiewit. That's the largest infrastructure construction company in North America. And we started out in infrastructure with them, but have since moved into other divisions, including light rail. So it's our software that's on the Ottawa light rail construction project in Ontario. We're also working with a group out of Australia that's testing our software right now, and testing is going very well. And the reason I say testing is because when you come out with a disruptive technology, it's hard for people to believe that you can actually do what you say you can do, even though they know that at some point in time, modern technology is going to replace a lot of old business practices, antiquated workflow processes. But when someone finally brings that technology out, it's still hard for them to believe that you can actually deliver on that. So initially, what we have to do, and it's getting less and less and less now, but people want to test it. And so when I say we're moving into Canada, it's kind of funny because companies will be, okay, this might work in the United States, but does it work in Canada? Which, it's kind of funny to us because, of course, this will work anywhere. But when you're talking about algorithms and post-processing of data, and different parts of the world have different curvatures, they just question, does this work in this part of the world as well? So it's currently being tested in Canada. We're working with a very large data collection company in Australia that also is in Papua New Guinea and recently acquired another large data collection company in the UK. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about the fact that we're starting to see adoption in other parts of the world as well, even though that wasn't necessarily part of our initial execution plan, which was to focus on the United States. I mean, this is a big market, but already, if you've got something and it works anywhere in the world, I think the cat is going to get out of the bag at some point in time, and you're going to start to see adoption in other parts of the world. Unfortunately, we built our platform to be able to manage and execute and take advantage of the opportunity in other parts of the world without having to change anything in our technology platform now.
You mentioned Canada. I know you were granted a patent in Canada for the technology. Given that as you say, you're a disruptive technology company, what is the sort of current patent situation in terms of protecting the IP?
Yeah, that's again, that's I'm glad you brought that up. It's somewhat unprecedented for an early stage startup technology company to have, any number of patents. But it's definitely unprecedented for an early stage startup technology company to have as many as we have. We have a very extensive IP portfolio now. So the patent that was just issued was a Canadian patent, now gives us 20 issued patents. So these aren't pending patents, these are issued patents. And they're what is known as pioneer patents. So we are the pioneer in patenting the methodologies and processes required to digitally capture, record, and display where buried utilities and pipelines are in the ground. And our focus was always on North America. I mean, this is a big market. And as a small company, we wanted to make sure that we had the resources to be able to process these patents and also prosecute these patents. So even though someone might say, well, why didn't you do it for, Europe or the rest of the world? Well, the reality of it is that would be very expensive. So our focus was North America. So again, Canada and the United States. And to date, we have 20 issued patents, which basically create a moat around the processes that are required to be able to do what we do, which again, is digitally capture and record and display where utilities and pipelines are buried below the ground, particularly down to the accuracies we're talking about, which is the centimeter.
I've also got to ask you a difficult question because our readers have asked me, and we've got you back on the podcast at their request. So there are investors in the share price who like the company, they like the story, they're big fans, but they have been since you listed in Canada and subsequently listed in Frankfurt as well. The share price has been heading south more or less. Can you give us some background on why that is? Because a lot of people, I mean, I've spoken to investors myself who are a bit baffled by that because they think that the share price should actually be higher than it is.
Yes, and one thing I don't want to do is come up with a whole bunch of excuses. No one wants to hear that. The only thing I can do is be transparent and truthful and give you my opinion on why that is. And this is actually some of the feedback that I'm even getting back from the investment firms that we work with, and also the brokers, which a lot of them have fairly large stake in ProStar. Last year, especially the micro cap capital markets, in particular in Canada on the venture, had a pretty good run. And the reason they had such a good run, believe it or not, in some cases was because of COVID. No one could go anywhere. That they were either at home working away or they were in the office working away. And the micro cap market had a really, really good run. Well, COVID, which I think everyone thought would go away or at least, dissipate a little bit, in some cases, there's a little bit of concern out there that it hasn't dissipated or gone away as fast as they had hoped for. And in fact, we're starting to see an increase. And there's a little bit of hesitation out in the market right now. And what's happened since February is the market has steadily decreased, and there's been an incredible amount of stress on the market. So it's not only ProStar, it's the majority of microcap companies. Their share price have continued to decline. And normally there's an old saying out there that says, sell in May and stay away, which means the summer months, there's going to be no activity because everyone goes away, kids are out of school, and the market just naturally declines. And then things pick back up in the fall around September when everybody goes back to school, everybody comes back to work, and then there's more activity, and then the market regains itself. And there's a lot of opportunities to invest, at the end of the summer, and the brokers know that. Well, this year, what I'm hearing is they should have sold in February and stayed away because it was February actually where the market began to just steadily decline. Now, interestingly enough, and as depressing as it is, and I hate to watch the share price on a daily basis, but I don't mind sharing with everyone I do. I probably look at it, 10 or 15 times a day, hoping that something will start to turn around. Now, as far as ProStar is concerned, if you take a look at what we've done since January 11th, which is the date that we went public, and our opening share price was 40 cents. I think today we're around 43 or 44 cents. And you take a look at the milestones that we've achieved. Most of them are press released because they're material change. So you can just go to our website and take a look at the news and see what we've done over the last 8 months. It's interesting because I would argue we've done more in the last 18 months than we did in the previous 5 years. And yet our share price has increased by 4 cents to where, as compared to where we are today. And yet we've reduced an incredible amount of risk and liability based on the milestones we have achieved, including the customers that have adopted our software, the patents that have been issued, the new complete PointMan Pro platform that took us over 3 years to develop that we released, the new vertical markets that we're moving into. So I'm obviously biased. I think there's incredible value in where our share price is today. And based on what I know we're going to be able to execute on, even for the balance of the year. So, again, I don't make any excuses and I don't have a crystal ball, and there's some things that I just don't have any control over. The one thing I can control and that we are controlling is that we continue to execute, and this disruptive software that we've developed is now in the market being used by some of the largest companies in the world. Government agencies have mandated it. I work with the largest manufacturers of the equipment that's required to go out and survey the GPS equipment, the equipment that's required to identify the precise location of where utilities and pipelines are buried in the ground. So I think we're well poised to capitalize on what I think this infrastructure bill is going to create. And I think the future is bright for us. And I think, if someone was looking for investment, I think there's value in our share price. But again, I don't have a crystal ball. I can only base it on what we've done in the past, particularly in the last 8 months, and what we have in our sales pipeline right now, the customers that we're talking to, the infrastructure bill, as I mentioned, what I think is going to take place, for example, over the next 8 months, particularly over the next 3 months, but even over the next 8 months, over the next 18 months, over the next 24 months. I think long term, there's incredible value in our share price for investors right now.
And I know you're not really allowed to say very much about the future of ProStar, because obviously you're aware of a lot of information
Yeah.
that's confidential. But looking ahead over the next 6 months, just finally, from a sort of your perspective as the CEO of ProStar, what would you most like to see for the company achieving, say between now and the end of March, to make you really happy?
I would like to see where, as opposed to where we have to go out and talk to potential clients, explain to them what it is that we do, how disruptive it is, and then have them where they have to test it. Because what they normally do is they're not going to change what they're currently doing because this is just too new. So what they do is they have to run what we do parallel with their current business practices. And then if they like it, then they adopt it because there's a lot of risk and liability anytime you adopt a new innovative disruptive technology. That's why they call them early adopters, the companies that are early adopters that are looking to change the way things are currently being done. Okay, but it takes time. And I'm going to give you an example. To get to the point where CDOT mandated our software, that took 2 years. Okay, 2 years of literally testing it. Okay. I have now large engineering and surveying firms that have been well entrenched in their current business practices for well over 25 or 30 years. It took many of them over a year to test our software before they finally adopted it. Okay. Now, what's happening is I have companies calling us. I don't have to reach out to them because they're hearing about this name ProStar and this product PointMan. And they're calling us. And then they ask us if they can test it for 6 days. Well, there's a big difference in the sales cycle of, 1 to 2 years and 6 days. So where I want this to get to is to the point where companies are calling us and they don't even need to test it for 6 days. We've got the credibility in the market, we've got the reputation, we've got the marquee client list, and they know that it works. And I think somewhere between now and I'm just guessing 6 months, is because I'm seeing how things are starting to progress and we're starting to shorten that sales cycle. And in fact, companies are reaching out to us. That's going to be a pivotal point for us because it significantly reduces the amount of time that it takes to sell to them. But also, I don't have to spend a bunch of resources, marketing efforts, trying to communicate and reach out to these companies. We just become a name that's out in the market that these companies know that if they don't use this new software, then they're going to fall behind what other companies are doing. And that's a trajectory and ramp up that you want to see in any company. And I think that over the next 6 to 12 months, we could see that. And again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm basing it on everything that's been taking place, particularly, as I mentioned, over the last 8 months. We're starting to see a lot of activity in the market. We're starting to see a lot of adoption. I've shortened the sales cycle down. We've got companies that are calling us. I've also moved into the utility industry now. I've moved into the municipal industry. I've got companies testing what we're doing in other countries. We've introduced a new product, as I mentioned, that's revolutionary, that works anywhere in the world. So we're well poised, and I'm really starting to see, as I mentioned, just a ramp up in the excitement and the activities in the market that I think are a pretty good indicator of what's to come in the future.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Paige. That's fantastic. We'll obviously be keeping a close eye on the stock and on progress with the company as we go through the autumn. Thanks for coming on today.
Well, I appreciate it. And my closing statement always is, and I like this, is the proof. My grandma used to say this, right? The proof is in the pudding. What I tell everyone is just be patient or put us on your radar and watch ProStar over the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And at some point, I think that just based on our execution and the milestones we're going to be achieving, that will exude confidence into investors that they want to be involved in ProStar.
And investors can find you. You're listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange under the ticker MAPS, MAPS, and also on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange as well.
Well, we should probably mention a major milestone as well in closing. So, we are a U.S. company. Most of our clients are US based. This is a huge US problem. And one of the things I always wanted to do was to list on the OTCQB, which we recently did as well. So we're now trading in the United States under the ticker symbol MAPPF.
That's F for Freddy.
And I'm also starting to focus, yeah, I'm also starting to focus a lot of our marketing in the US because obviously as far as the capital markets are concerned, I mean, this is the biggest capital market in the world. So it gives us also tremendous opportunity to start to focus on the US capital markets. And so our listing on the OTCQB was also a major milestone that we achieved this year.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time there, Paige. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. And, happy to talk to you anytime and give everyone an update once again in the near future. So thank you.
Thanks a lot. You've been listening to the Armchair Trader podcast. Make sure you visit our website, www.thearmchairtrader.com, for your daily dose of financial markets news and sign up to our free newsletter there.